I want to take a quick survey. How many people were serving starting in 1967 through 1987? We'll show of hands real quick. Okay, pretty much I figured we'd get a large turnout. That was the same period of time that infamous traitor John Walker was selling secrets to the Russians. He was selling the key cards. We would have lost World War III because he was selling locations of the nuclear submarines, of the presidential orders. It affected all of us who were in Vietnam, and it was all because of a massive security communications flaw. Dave Winters was part of a large handful of folks that were told to, you got to go in this direction. They didn't know what they were up to. But here's what Dave did. He figured out a way to beat the Russians and the communications security flaw. That's what you're going to listen to today. And here's the even better part. As we all remember back being junior officers, he did it without telling anybody. He ran this out of the London office for the 4-star admiral, and he operated on his own. It actually had a little bit of a flavor of James Bond, except that's the only woman, okay? Nobody knew what he was doing, and that's part of his presentation. He's been nominated. This secret was kept for 30 years. It was declassified in November of 2017 at the NSA historical meeting, the 75th anniversary, and it was the first time people heard about exactly how he stopped the Russians from listening. Please give a warm welcome to David Douglas Winters, and you're the third group who's heard this presentation. Okay, David.
All right. The revolution that nobody noticed. This is what sailors call a sea story. It's the tale of how a rogue outsider slammed shut the biggest security gap in U.S. history, and he did it without permission, in plain sight, turned the espionage world on its ear, but nobody noticed. Well, at least the good guys didn't notice, because, you know, people see what they want to see. The yarn begins with telecommunications. Bland, nerdy telecommunications are the lifeblood of our security. Orders, reports, intelligence, everything must be communicated. Everything must remain secret, so our communications are encrypted. We use codes. But of course, if our codes are stolen or broken, then so is our security. And we were shocked to learn back in 1985 that our security had been broken for about 20 years. That's when they discovered the John Walker spy ring. Now, this ring stole and sold complete volumes of our code keys to the enemy. They purloined so much key that they actually exceeded the enemy capacity to use it all. So to get additional U.S. decoding equipment to keep up with all the stolen keys, Communist North Korea got tapped back in 1968 to attack and seize a solitary U.S. Navy intelligence ship, USS Pueblo. Now, this barefaced piracy did not make much sense to us at the time. We did not know that the Walker spy ring was already selling our code keys to the enemy, so we did not realize that with the code machines from this ship, they could read our most intimate mail. It became a source of unimaginably valuable intelligence for our enemies. This probably enabled them to continue funding the Cold War for significantly longer than would have been otherwise possible. My point here is, in short, this spy ring was a humongously whopping big deal. Yet for a couple of decades, nobody noticed. People see what they want to see. Now, when these weasels were finally discovered, And the Navy realized that they had no clue as to who else on our side might be compromised. Then, as a last-ditch blunderbuss defense, they simply fired everybody involved in communications security and replaced them with inexperienced, new, let's face it, victims. I was, of course, one of those pitiful replacements. I was a plain old vanilla-flavored ship's officer. They hustled me through a highly specialized postgraduate degree program and a personal review of the John Walker spy case, and then posted me to a plainclothes job in London. It could have been worse. I felt like James Bond. People are laughing. Okay. James Bond, except, without the good looks, the physique, the charm, the money, the fast cars, the fawning flocks of female. Okay, maybe not so much like John. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Upon arrival, I learned that I was to oversee the replacement of all our old code machines throughout Europe, the Middle East, Africa, the Mediterranean. This was to be the long-term fix for our security problem. However, from studying Walker's methods, I had already discovered that our old code machines were not the problem. The problem was code keys, hard copy, paper tape, IBM cards, computer cards, stuff like that. Because hard copy code keys were what Walker exploited. Hard copy code keys were what his agents simply photographed or Xeroxed, and most critically, hard copy code keys were what we still used in our new machines. So this purported security fix would really not fix anything at all. Apparently, nobody had noticed this. People see what they want to see. Well, I knew other spies had to be out there, and history proved I was right. But accordingly, I took this discrepancy personally because my personal backside was on the line. So I began a personal campaign to find a security solution that might actually work. And I diligently, fished around for a better fix until I hooked a user's manual for our new code machines. And yes, Your Honor, I do know real men do not read instructions. Consider me admonished. However, from the small print appendix, I learned that our new machines incorporated an old, never used contingency capability that nobody had noticed. These machines could safely transmit code keys electronically. Well, eureka! This was the holy freaking grail of code key security. Because if these machines could transmit code keys, then I could distribute all my code keys digitally over the air and completely eliminate all those hard copies. No hard copies means nothing to steal. Nothing to steal means nothing gets stolen. Sweet. Too easy. Realistically speaking, of course, my idea would never fly unless I could overcome some big-time bureaucratic obstacles. The first of these being fear. After the John Walker disaster, everybody was afraid of the security stuff. And out of fear, nobody would so much as discuss messing with code key security, much less endorse my fix. So I resorted to weasel words and semantics. Anything that involved security was automatically scary, so I would not call my plan a security fix at all, but instead pass it off as simple logistics. Logistics was a good fit. Strictly speaking, electronic distribution was improved logistics, even though the security fix was my motivation. It would be sort of a Trojan horse operation. On the outside, all logistics. On the inside, the security fix. So nobody would notice. People see what they want to see. Satisfied with that, I moved to the next obstacle, which was even more touchy: professional ego. Now we're talking serious stuff, right? This was touchy because my new logistics would not merely plug the security gap, it would also save, and we are talking literal millions of dollars, when it eliminated all the expensive high security couriers, manufacturing, shipping, storage for hard copy keys. One would not think this should cause problems, saving money. But remember, saving money would inevitably reduce some bureaucrat's budget, and that would make somebody grumpy. Well, hostility from bureaucrats was merely par for the course. But the ignorant, officious meddling that might result was another thing entirely. So to head this off, I figured that if I refrained from projecting financial benefits, then nobody would notice the savings until after the fact. Too late to interfere. Therefore, I would just keep silent about saving money and claim no credit for anything. Easy. Understand, now, I was a small cog, but I turned a really big axle. As a staff officer for a 4-star admiral, I had responsibilities for multiple continents and several seas. So as long as I kept my head down and refrained from braggadocio, then my revolution could encompass much of the globe without attracting attention. Nobody should notice. People see what they want to see. This approach looked simple, but in execution actually proved hopelessly complex, and eventually I realized it was because, mimicking the bureaucrats around me, I had configured my approach, the whole caper, to achieve at every step ponderously broad coordination and consensus, which is how bureaucrats stereotypically prefer to function. But it was not the Navy way. See, the Navy is traditionally at the pointy end of the spear. We often operate far away, alone, too far out to coordinate permission for anything. Therefore, bold independent initiative became the Navy norm centuries ago. Accordingly, I reconsidered seeking any approval from anybody for any of my ideas. After all, they were not prohibited by any of our rules, so nobody should notice. People see what they want to see. Therefore, I just did it. I quietly requisitioned every single piece of code key transmission equipment in the United States Navy, and then I wrote the necessary orders and instructions and distributed the hot hardware throughout my domain. And if questioned about my activities, I delivered an enthusiastic, nerdy technical explanation complete with multiple minute details, footnotes, and philosophical commentary that always got me bored eye rolls and a prompt change of subject. But I never ever mentioned the inherent revolution that I had begun. Consequently, my escaper stayed under the radar, and we got the whole shebang organized and harmoniously humming along for the entire Mediterranean fleet without so much as a hiccup. And I really thought I got away with it. But back at the ranch in Washington, D.C., unbeknownst to yours truly, hard copy code key logistics have become a major migraine for the entire Defense Department. High security, manufacturing, storage, and shipping expenses were ballooning like bullfrogs on anabolic steroids. So the Washington weenies got all excited when rumor of my electronic logistics magic somehow bubbled up to our commander of U.S. Naval Telecommunications, the late, great, and brilliant Admiral Jerry O. Tuttle, God bless him. Now, our admiral immediately recognized the potential for this logistics trick to relieve his overstressed logistics budgets. People see what they want to see. Consequently, he fired off a Navy-wide message disclosing this potential new logistics capability and requesting comments. Awkward. See, this message surprised my boss. And in our business, surprises were generally bad juju. He did, of course, know what I was doing, but recall I had never overtly made him or anybody else aware of the enormous monetary savings that would occur back stateside. So a memo promptly issued from his desk. Winters, my office, now. Well, I was busted. Now, to his credit, my boss was a proud seagoing warrior, not a mindless bureaucrat. He did quickly recognize the value of my innovations. And no naval officer makes it far without having learned to macarena through a minefield on a moment's notice. He could outdance Bojangles barefoot on broken beer bottles. So he was equal to the task of giving Admiral Tuttle our potentially startling news that we had already put his brilliant epiphany into practice. He drafted an eloquent response expressing our sincere honor at having proactively anticipated and provisionally demonstrated the technical feasibility of Admiral Tuttle's brilliant logistics solution. He laid out my successful procedures, quoted my references, but discreetly did not mention the fact that I had already boosted every piece of the required equipment out of the Navy inventories. And I, of course, pointedly did not broach the subject of my fundamental but still undeclared security motivation. Happily, Admiral Tuttle did not initiate court-martial proceedings, but instead congratulated my boss on our initiative. Washington, of course, never noticed that their new Trojan pony was pregnant, so to speak, because they were not about to look a gift horse in the mouth, much less down her throat. People see what they want to see. To replace the gear that I had light-fingered, the Navy shamelessly plagiarized my methods to rip off the United States Marine Corps and outfitted our ships with their stuff. My homegrown procedures were formalized and incorporated into fleet communications worldwide, and our Trojan mare got named OTAR, O-T-A-R, for over-the-air Rekeying. The Joint Chiefs of Staff brought the other services on board, and our allies followed suit, and OTAR became a household word in telecommunications security. On land, at sea, in the air, in orbit, it saves piles of money. But, more important, in the three decades since, there have been no more stolen code keys. None. But of course, this attracted no attention. When nobody robs your house, you don't generally notice, do you? People see what they want to see. And furthermore, as I tracked the progress of my revolution through the ensuing years, I found that it remained known merely as a logistics trick. The security gains languished utterly unnoticed until October 2017, when I finally spilled the proverbial beans in a presentation before the International Symposium for Cryptologic History, sponsored by the National Security Agency. Now, this turned some ears red, but the truth had to be told so that OTAR could be formally recognized and incorporated into our communications security doctrine, not merely logistics. So now you know how a rogue outsider slammed shut the biggest security gap in U.S. history. You know that he shortened the Cold War and probably thereby saved countless lives. You know that he did it without permission, sneaking it right under the noses of the Navy, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the National Security Agency, the Department of Defense, and all of NATO. But most important, you know that for 30 long years, nobody noticed. Because people see what they want to see. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for your kind indulgence.
Has your accomplishment been recognized?
Dave's been nominated for the Hall of Honor for the NSA Cryptological Historical
Right on.
There is a book and there is a movie.
He always goes a little bit, one step too far.
It's so refreshing when you see a good guy win. And so that's really I think the message. And I didn't want to bore you, but here's the latest Institute of Proceedings. I just got it like 2 days ago. Front cover is cyber warfare, get ready to fight. There's about a dozen articles in here. It's all the stuff Dave does, but I can confirm out of naval experience it will be ignored because there's a whole group of all service cyber warriors that are going to save us.
But in telecommunications, you do your job right. The way you know is because nobody noticed. Everything worked normally.